Title 24 Overview. The reference materials that we used for this section are the California 2016 Residential Compliance Manual and the California Building Standards Code Part 6. Both of these documents can be found either at the link on the screen or can be downloaded directly from the online training portal.
So the overall goal is to gain a broad understanding of the California Title 24 code and how it interacts with national standards, other state codes, and local jurisdiction. So you as a HERS rater need to be aware of Title 24 because it drives everything that you do as a HERS rater. Title 24 is much broader than just HERS inspections. HERS inspections are part of Title 24, but that is not all that there is in regards to the building energy efficiency standards. So what you do as a HERS rater, it's a small portion of what Title 24 actually covers. This is everything that we're going to be covering in this particular PowerPoint. It's a fairly long PowerPoint, 10 different sections. We'll be covering in this particular order. Some of these items might intertwine with one another because they are somewhat interrelated in some aspects, but for the most part, this is the general order of presentation.
So the 2016 Title 24 Energy Code will be going into effect for any permit that is applied for on or after January 1st, 2017. So now there will be an overlap. So you will still be seeing permits that were pulled under the 2013 code after January 1st. A lot of, especially production builders, will go in like in December, and they'll pull a large number of permits for the rest of their project so they continue building and have the homes be similar across the board rather than having to change codes in the middle of a project. Sometimes that's unavoidable, but you will see 2013 homes being built well after January 1st. Usually about a year is what it takes for those homes to be built and completed, sometimes a little bit longer. But that's more on the new construction side. For additions, alterations, because they don't have a large group of homes that they know that are going to be built or worked on, those change over very quickly. So shortly after January, you're going to stop seeing 2013 additions, alterations work, and it's going to change very quickly to 2016 code. So now every time the code does change, it does get more strict. When we went from 2008 to 2013 code, that was an increase of about 27%. So going from 2013 to 2016 is a little bit less at 23%, but still that's a pretty significant jump. It used to be 10 to 15%. So the last two code changes have been significantly more stringent than in the past. When we look at a cost impact, we're looking at about an average increase of $2,300 for a single family home if you're using the performance approach. As you go up in stringency, the cost to comply also goes up, similar to the cost increase for the 08 to 13 code, but still it's a significant amount, and you can understand why a production builder might go in and pull those additional permits to save that dollar amount per house. It adds up over time.
These are just some key definitions for reference. They're just here for you to refer back to. They're going to be in your manual as well, obviously, where this PowerPoint presentation is included. You'll be referring to some of these items, or most of these items, throughout the presentation as well. So you just need to be aware with what they are. HERS stands for Home Energy Rating System. The AER is the Appliance Efficiency Standard. ASHRAE regulates mechanical ventilation requirements and indoor air quality requirements. ASHRAE itself stands for American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. The CEC is the California Energy Commission. We'll be talking about energy budgets and energy credits. NACA, which is what I mentioned a second ago, is the National Appliance Efficiency Conservation Act. So that is the regulation on a national level that regulates appliance efficiency. And then we'll be talking about time-dependent valuation, and then Title 24 and Title 24 Part 6. We mentioned that. So moving forward, we'll be referring back to some of these items as we go along. So in order to be compliant with Title 24, there's two methods of compliance. And these are the two. So you have the prescriptive method and you have the performance method. Regardless of what you do in California, these are the only two approved methods that you're going to use to achieve Title 24 compliance. So the prescriptive method is the Title 24 when it's achieved by following preset Title 24 specifications and mandatory requirements based on the climate zone that you're building in. The performance method, it's achieved by having a Title 24 energy analyst demonstrate a project's Title 24 energy compliance by analyzing the building using CEC approved Title 24 software. So basically anybody can use the prescriptive method. There are preset tables, which I'll show you an example of here in a sec. Basically, as long as you transfer the correct values from the tables to the forms and then submit the form properly, you're able to calculate, or I guess to preset your Title 24. When you're using the performance method, an energy analyst actually has to run the building design through software, and the software will determine whether that's a compliant plan or not. The difference between the two mainly is the fact that with the prescriptive method, you can't trade anything off. You have to do exactly what the tables say based on the climate zone that you're in. With the performance method, aside from the mandatory measures, which you always have to do in both prescriptive and performance, you can trade certain items on and off, or you can increase and decrease certain values to customize the design to what you want to do. But again, you have to have an energy analyst running the software on the plan. It's not automatic. So the first way to do it is the prescriptive method, like I mentioned earlier, and the prescriptive method uses package A, prescriptive package A, which I'll show you in a sec. Those are the tables that I talked about in the previous slide. So in the old code, there used to be multiple packages. So you would have package C, D, and E, and each package would have different values and they would be applicable to different scenarios. However, in the 2013 code, they condensed it down to one package. It's package A, and that's the only table you can pick from in order to calculate Title 24, I shouldn't say calculate Title 24, determine Title 24 compliance using the prescriptive method. And this is what the table looks like. So this is just a piece of the table. Obviously, there's multiple pages to this table that cover every single building component within a home. As you can see from the top of the table, you'll see the climate zones 1 through 16. So the way these tables are used, you determine the climate zone that you're in, and then by going down that particular column, you identify the values for different building components in that particular home. As long as you match or exceed what those values are, you meet Title 24. So the only thing the person would need to do in this particular scenario is transfer those values to the CF1R, and we'll talk about the forms in a sec. And then those forms will be submitted to the building jurisdiction for permit application, just like anything else. Now the other option is the performance method, and like I said, the performance method is based on what the builder, or the client, I should say, tells the building analyst, the energy analyst, to design the building as. So the performance method is always based on the prescriptive package requirements. The only thing that the performance method allows you to do is to offset some of those requirements by making up values and efficiency somewhere else. You always have to follow the mandatory requirements no matter what, but just to give you an example, you might be able to bring down installation values by raising the efficiency of the windows or the roofing information or something else along the line of energy efficiency. So that's how it works. And then it's based on the standard design, which is the prescriptive package. And then once the energy analyst changes whatever it is that they change, they come up with the proposed design, and that's the design that's turned into the building department for permit application. And either way, whether they go performance or whether they go prescriptive, it takes us down to our documentation process, and the documentation process and the forms are the same. It doesn't matter. So we'll talk about those in a sec. And now we're going to talk about, in fact, the compliance documentation. So the compliance documentation and its process is a requirement to receive a building final. A building inspector cannot issue a certificate of occupancy unless all necessary compliance documents, which are the CF1Rs, the CF2Rs, and the CF3Rs have been completed, and we'll talk about what those forms are in a sec. Electronic registration of the forms is only required when HERS measures are required. So we're going to be talking about the forms, and you as a HERS rater will have to upload those forms into the CHIRS registry. However, That's only required from you as the HERS rater when there are in fact HERS measures required on the project. Now, from a brand new construction, residential new construction standpoint, a lot of the HERS measures are mandatory, so you're always going to see HERS measures in this code cycle. However, in the additions and alterations, you might still run into situations where there are no HERS measures required. So if there are no HERS measures required, electronic upload of the forms in the registry is also not required. And the only thing that would still be required would be the paper forms turned into the building department for application and then final. But again, if there is no HERS measures required, you're not even going to be around that project to do anything about it, because your inspections are not going to be required. All permits requiring HERS inspections will require all forms to be processed electronically through the registries, like I mentioned a second ago. So when I'm talking about processing the forms through the registries, you're not actually filling out the form on paper and then uploading or scanning the form to the registry. You're going to be entering the information directly into the registry, and then the registry produces the form that you will print out and give to the building inspector, subcontractor, builder, whoever it is that collects them, or you may also download them in soft copy and email it to them. So the three sets of forms that we have are the CF1Rs, the CF2Rs, and the CF3Rs. The CF1R is the certificate of compliance. So this is the form that's either filled out by the person using the prescriptive package table or by the energy analyst by using the computer. Documents will need to be done in order to comply with the building energy efficiency standards by summarizing what HERS verifications are required and the targets for those verifications. It's generated at the beginning of the process and submitted as part of the permit application. It's typically generated, like I said, by the energy consultant, but it's certified electronically by the builder in the registry. So the form will be again uploaded into the registry. And from there, it creates all the targets and the other forms that the HERS rater and subcontractors will need to be filled out. And that's an example of the front page of the new CF1R for residential new construction. So as you can see in the very front page, and this is just a highlight of it, there's a section that's going to say the building complies, and then HERS measures are required for this particular building. And then in the back of it, there'll be pages of a summary. There'll be a summary of what HERS measures are actually required. You can see a sample of the CF1R for download in the LMS while you're logged in on the training system. So go ahead and download that form and check it out. Now the CF2R is the certificate of installation. Now up to this point, the CF2R in the older code cycles was referred to as the CF6R. So if you ever hear that term CF6R, that is basically the equivalent of the CF2R under the new code. So you're not going to be saying CF6Rs anymore. All forms under 2013 are going to be called CF2Rs. These are the certificate of installations. These are the forms filled out by the subcontractor, basically certifying that whatever it is that they're installing is matching or exceeding the standards set by the CF1R. So the documents that the installing contractor did to comply with the building energy efficiency standards and requirements of the CF1R, like I stated. It's completed by the installing contractor when the work has been completed. And keep in mind, there are CF2Rs required even when there are no HERS verifications. So there's a lot of forms in Title 24. Some of those forms are HERS forms and some of those are not. Even if there are no HERS verifications, there are still forms filled out by the subcontractors that are required, whether there are HERS verifications required or not. When there are HERS verifications required, even the forms that don't require HERS verifications are required to be uploaded by the contractor into the registry. So in some cases, it might be completely by the HERS rater or on behalf of the installer, but it still needs to be signed by the installer. So there are situations where the subcontractor might contract the rater to fill out the forms for him. However, the subcontractor is still required to sign the forms because they still hold the liability for the form, regardless whether the HERS rater is actually filling it out or not. The CF3R is a certificate of field verification and diagnostic testing. So this is the form that's actually filled out and signed by the rater, and it's the form that's QA to make sure that it's filled out properly by the Cheers QA. So this is the form that the HERS rater is ultimately responsible for. The CF3R used to be called the CF4R in the older code cycles. So again, if you hear the form CF4R, don't get confused. That's just what the CF3R used to be called in 2008, in the 2008 code cycle and before. 2013 moving forward, it's called the CF3R. So the HERS rater fills this out, and it's the certification that the tested energy features match or exceed the requirements of the CF1R. It's filled out after a CF2R is completed, and the results of the field verification are entered by the rater in the registry, and then the CF3R is published. If sampling is used, the CF3R is still produced for all lots, tested or sampled. So we'll talk about sampling in a little bit, but basically the HERS rater doesn't test every single home. They test one out of X amount of homes, and I mentioned that before in other PowerPoints. But basically, whether the home was tested or not, a CF3R, it's still produced by the HERS rater. The difference is the fact that the CF3R for the home that was actually tested, we'll say tested, and then we'll have obviously all the test information. And then the home that was sampled will have a CF3R. It's not going to have any test information, but it's going to have a checkbox that says passed as part of sample testing. So either way, every single lot will have an individual CF3R with an individual address on them, whether it was tested or sampled.
So let's review the documentation process workflow. We've talked about each of the forms and who's responsible for them, but let's just look at this here. Maybe this will help some of you better understand the actual workflow of how these forms will make their way through the system. So as we mentioned, you have your compliance analyst or owner, builder, general contractor, depending on whether you're using the performance method or prescriptive method. They're responsible for the CF1R, and they're going to fill out that information. Either they're going to create those prescriptive forms in the registry itself and download that CF1R, or they're going to import the performance file if they use that method. Once they've done that, then the installing contractor has access to it. They will do their installation based on the values claimed or modeled on that CF1R. They will then go into the registry and they will enter all of their CF2R data into the registry, which will then generate that CF2R document. And then last, the HERS rater is going to come along. He now has access to both the 1R and the 2R. You can see all that data. HERS rater is going to then perform their verification of the CF2R data. They will then enter that again into the HERS registry. That generates the CF3R document. So all those three documents are going to come out of the HERS provider registry. They're going to be downloadable. They're digital copies. They can either be printed out or emailed, whichever the recipient prefers. And a copy will need to go to the builder, or if it is a homeowner, general contractor, whoever is responsible for that particular project, and then that person will then provide copies to the building department and the homeowner. So both of those are required to get copies. Now building departments, some of them will want hard copies, some of them want soft copies, and then other ones, they just go into the registry themselves. All building departments have access to the registry. They'll go in, they'll review either the project itself or what we call a project status report. And as long as all of the documents are there, they're signed, they're complete, the building department doesn't want any of that additional documentation, they will go ahead and move forward with their inspection at that point. Now, when we talk about HERS provider registries, we're specifically talking about those organizations that they're private companies. They're separate from the state government, but they are regulated by the state government. So here in California currently, there are two. This number changes occasionally depending on if there are other companies that go through the certification process with the CEC, but currently we have two, Cheers and CalCerts, and obviously you've heard of Cheers because you're here going through our training. And so both of these companies, as I mentioned, they're independently owned and operated. They're both heavily regulated by the California Energy Commission. They have to provide the same training, as well as the registry has to perform in a way that complies with the state regulations. We have to have the same QA programs. So everything is virtually the same, but we're allowed to go through certain things a little bit differently. For example, our user interface for our registry is completely different than that of CalCerts. You have to enter in all the same information, you get the same documents, but we just go about it in a little bit different manner. So that's really the difference between the HERS provider registries. As I mentioned, there's two right now. Sometimes there's more than that, but currently that's what we have there.
So now let's talk about HERS diagnostic inspections. So these are the actual inspections that as HERS raters you have to be able to execute in the field for the purpose of meeting Title 24 compliance.
As was mentioned earlier, some of the HERS measures are mandatory. There is no way that you can get out of them, even using the performance method. Some of those mandatory measures are duct leakage, fan watt draw, cooling coil airflow, return duct and air filter device design, and whole building mechanical ventilation. These are required in all climate zones, and you cannot get out of them. We also have what we call prescriptive measures. Now, when we looked at prescriptive package A, those were the measures that were required, or the values that were required prescriptively, and can be modified if you use the performance method. So refrigerant charge measurement is prescriptively required in climate zones 2 and 8 through 15. So it's not in every climate zone, but only certain climate zones. If you do use the performance method, you can remove the requirement for refrigerant charge, but you will have to replace the credit that it had with something else. And here we have the list of HERS verified performance compliance options. Now, not all performance options are HERS verified. Some of them you can just model, such as higher levels of insulation, which don't require HERS verification, or better performing windows. Those will be verified by the local building inspector, but there are several that do require HERS verification. So this list is those items. We start with quality insulation installation, or QII as it's more commonly referred to, supply duct location, surface area and R value, verified duct system design, energy efficiency ratio and seasonal energy efficiency ratio, or EER and SEER, low leakage air handler, pipe insulation credit, central parallel piping, compact hot water distribution system, water heating recirculation systems, building air leakage or blower door, and then we also have two items which are not for the performance compliance so much. However, they can gain credit or be used for, in the case of the photovoltaic or solar inspections, those are for programs such as the New Solar Homes Partnership. It is HERS verification. It's not required for Title 24, but there is credit available for photovoltaics as a performance option. And then existing conditions for performance alterations, and we'll talk about those when we get into the additions alteration section, but those are verifications by the HERS rater actually before compliance is completed. But we'll talk about those more. But all of these do require HERS verification.